Texas just passed a firearm regulation that transformed hundreds of thousands of lawful weapon owners into possible criminals overnight. Yet the majority of folks carrying at this moment remain completely unaware it even occurred. And prior to holstering anything in 2026, you must understand precisely what shifted, what remained unchanged, and that single legal boundary you simply cannot violate. So smash that subscribe button, leave a reply with your hometown, and let's dive in. Why does the 2026 Texas firearm regulation update matter? Texas boasts more documented weapons than any other state across America, exceeding 1.1 million documented firearms, and approximately 11 million Texans possess at least one weapon, representing around 1 in 3 residents currently living here. Additionally, federally licensed merchants alone have distributed over 24 million firearms throughout Texas since 2000, and the typical weapon-owning Texan keeps 3 to 5 firearms inside their residence. Therefore, whenever Texas modifies a firearm regulation, it doesn't merely impact a tiny segment of the population. It immediately affects millions of ordinary civilians who transport, secure, or purchase firearms each and every week. The 2026 update carries weight because for the very first occasion, a category of weapon that might have placed an ordinary Texan behind bars merely 12 months prior is presently lawful to possess under state regulations. Yet most individuals carrying right now remain clueless about what shifted, what stayed constant, and precisely where that unseen legal boundary lies that distinguishes a liberated civilian from a federal prosecution. What the fresh regulation alters for Texas weapon owners prior to September 1st, 2025. Possessing a compact rifle, defined as any rifle featuring a barrel briefer than 16 inches, constituted a felony throughout Texas, even had you been an entirely law-respecting civilian who completed every requirement properly at the national level. Senator Hagenbeck, the individual who drove this legislation forward, declared that the ATF's reclassification of stabilization braces alone rendered roughly 360,000 firearms immediately unlawful under Texas state regulations, meaning hundreds of thousands of ordinary Texans arose one morning as criminals without committing even one new action. What Senate Bill 1596 genuinely modified is straightforward. Texas eliminated compact barrel firearms from its catalog of banned weapons completely, so the state can no longer detain or prosecute you for possessing one. The national regulations through the National Firearms Act persist. The $200 tax payment and ATF documentation procedure didn't vanish. However, Texas will no longer pile on an additional felony prosecution atop that, which formerly signified a weapon owner could endure punishment from 2 distinct authorities for the identical firearm resting inside their personal residence. How transport regulations throughout Texas have developed. Texas transport regulations didn't begin this unrestricted. Actually, for the majority of the 1900s, and transporting a handgun publicly throughout Texas was outright banned, period, with virtually zero exemptions for ordinary civilians. It wasn't until 1995 that Texas finally enacted its initial concealed transport regulation, requiring Texans to obtain a permit, finish instruction, discharge 50 rounds at a firing range, submit payment that previously reached as much as $140, and provide fingerprints merely to lawfully transport a handgun beyond their residence. Subsequently, in 2016, open transport became permitted for permit holders, and by 2021, Texas executed the most significant leap yet, transforming into the 21st state nationwide to become entirely permit-free, meaning most adults 21 and above could transport without any permit, instruction, or examination whatsoever. Even following permit-free transport passage, exceeding 200,000 Texans still elected to obtain a permit during 2022 alone, demonstrating that numerous individuals recognized that transporting intelligently means comprehending more than merely what the regulations permit. And presently, with the 2026 update incorporating compact barrel rifles into that transport discussion, the regulations have evolved once more. So the genuine inquiry becomes, are most carriers genuinely staying informed? Were you aware Texas merely received its initial transport regulation in 1995, where you may and may not lawfully transport most individuals here? Texas operates as a permit-free transport state, and presume that signifies they can stroll into any structure, any shop, or any gathering with a weapon on their waist. Yet that mindset is precisely what lands individuals in custody, because the catalog of locations where transporting remains entirely banned throughout Texas extends far lengthier than most weapon owners recognize. During an ordinary year, roughly 4,330 individuals perish from weapon violence throughout Texas, meaning someone dies from weapon violence throughout this state approximately every 2 hours. And a substantial portion of that legal hazard originates not from criminals, but from everyday weapon owners who merely entered the incorrect structure without understanding the regulations. Texas Penal Code, Section 46.03, establishes an extensive catalog of locations where nobody can transport: educational institutions, voting locations during Election Day, judicial buildings, secured airport zones, detention centers, and any tavern or enterprise generating over 51% of its revenue from alcohol sales, where transporting isn't merely prohibited, but a third-degree felony carrying as much as 10 years imprisonment. And that 51% regulation alone entraps thousands of carriers annually who assume a dining establishment with a tavern remains perfectly acceptable. Permit-free transport versus permitted transport clarified. Most individuals throughout Texas currently believe that because permit-free transport exists, obtaining a license to carry, or LTC, merely wastes time and resources. Yet, that mindset could genuinely cost you your privilege to transport the instant you depart Texas, because a Texas LTC receives acknowledgement throughout 37 or additional states via reciprocity arrangements, while permit-free transport grants you absolutely zero lawful transport privileges the moment you cross into another state, meaning without an LTC, you remain lawfully disarmed across a massive portion of the nation the instant you exit Texas. Beyond that, LTC holders may transport in locations forbidden to permit-free carriers, including within 1,000 feet of an educational institution under national regulations, at public government assemblies, and inside specific private properties that solely restrict unlicensed transport, granting permitted carriers considerably broader access. The LTC also accelerates your weapon acquisitions at the counter by serving as replacement for the standard FBI background verification, which during hectic stretches might require days. And that single benefit alone renders the approximately $40 submission cost one of the wisest expenditures a Texas weapon owner can make. Possible legal hazards for weapon owners. Most Texas weapon owners never intend to violate regulations, yet the statistics reveal that legal complications locate them anyway, because the divide between what individuals believe remains lawful and what genuinely remains lawful throughout Texas remains hazardously broad. The ATF tracked 48,632 confiscated firearms throughout Texas during a solitary year, 2022, which represents a 381% surge compared to the 10,111 firearms tracked during 2010, meaning law enforcement is catching up to weapon owners at a velocity most individuals throughout this state remain unprepared for. The most significant legal snares aren't complex. Transporting into a tavern displaying a 51% sign constitutes an automatic third-degree felony, carrying as much as 10 years imprisonment. Transporting inside an educational zone without an LTC can subject you to national prosecutions atop state prosecutions, and unlawful possession with a previous felony conviction. Under Texas Penal Code 46.04 constitutes a third-degree felony with a punishment spectrum of 2 to 10 years and monetary penalties reaching $10,000. And none of these demand malicious intent, merely a poor choice executed in an instant without understanding the regulations. What Texans ought to understand prior to transporting in 2026 entering 2026. The single most hazardous action a Texas weapon owner can commit involves assuming that because regulations grew more lenient, the dangers diminished, because reality demonstrates the exact contrary and the figures confirm it. Texans acquired over 5 million firearms between 2020 and 2023 alone, meaning millions of individuals obtained a weapon during a stretch when regulations transformed more rapidly than most individuals could monitor, and a considerable portion of those purchasers presently transport under permit-free transport with zero mandatory instruction, zero mandatory examination, and zero obligatory understanding of where they may and may not lawfully transport. A January 2025 poll of 1,200 Texans discovered that 91% endorse mandating criminal background verifications on every weapon exhibition acquisition, meaning even most pro-weapon Texans comprehend that transporting without understanding the regulations poses a serious concern. Prior to transporting anything in 2026, handgun, compact barrel rifle, or anything else, you must understand your disqualifications. Memorize the prohibited locations catalog. Comprehend the distinction between state regulations and national regulations, and genuinely contemplate obtaining your LTC. Because liberty without understanding merely creates a rapid pathway to felony. Presently, you understand precisely what transformed throughout Texas for 2026. Most carriers circulating right now lack this information, and that void is precisely what places respectable individuals in restraints. Smash that thumbs up button, subscribe so you never bypass an update, and deposit your most pressing inquiry in the replies beneath.